Good afternoon, everybody. Are we here? I think we are here. Give us a hi in the chat if you can see me. Because I'm not 100% sure I've gone live. Oh, yes, I have. There we go. Hey, look, people can see me. Hi, Florina. Welcome to our little webinar this afternoon. Hi, Becky. So, for those of you who've not been here before, oh, look, there's a whole minimum. Oh, wait, hold on. There, that's better. I've got it on the side there so I can see. Blimey, there's loads of people here. Thanks for all coming along. So for those of you who are new and haven't been to join us on one of these before, remember, hashtag not an official ESFA webinar. There will be opinion. There will be other things, but hopefully we'll get something out of it. Obviously, you're all working out how the chat works there, so that's good. I'll try and bang through it in a reasonable amount of time. My suspicion is let's see how far we get in an hour. And then if we're still going, we might go a bit longer, but don't necessarily want to go on too long. So, as we know, a week ago, we got the draft version of the rules. I have got the rules here ready, should we need them. But hopefully we can just stick with the slides. Matt says he loves the opinion bits. Thank you, Matt. Things like that will also happen if you put a thing in the chat. You may well pop up on the screen. We've got some other important banners as well, particularly this one. Need to keep our... I'll put that up every time there's some opinion. And hey, you can follow me on Twitter if you'd like. So we've got our draft rules. Clearly, there's a whole pile of new and exciting stuff in there that has caused some interest. I saw there was a story in FE Week today about the 4-week active thing, which we'll definitely be talking about. So basically, I picked what I think are top 5. And here are my top 5 big stuff. And then I've got a pile of slides that are just at this paragraph number, this changes, at this paragraph number, this changes. So it might be handy if you have a copy of the rules in front of you as well. You'll notice it in the description underneath the video. The slides are there ready for you to download. We've had a check and they seem to download all right. So that's sufficient housekeeping, I think. So let's see what we've got. So here are my 5 big stuffs, which we'll go through in a bit of detail. There's and these are kind of in the order they appear in the rules. There's a calculation for how we do prior learning, which I think is really useful and should stop people messing about with tuppeny halfpenny reductions here, there, and everywhere. We've got a big new calculation on how we do how we calculate the off the job hours. There's this whole thing which apparently has been in the rules since 1819. I think it was there last year, and we kind of questioned a couple of things about it, but it seems to be a big kind of thing now about active learning every 4 weeks. Another new thing, progress reviews, which we've always done progress reviews with our learners, but they are now mandatory and must be every 8 to 12 weeks. So there's a bare minimum of half a dozen other bits of paper that you need to get signed because they couldn't trust us to just do them. And the other thing that everybody's shouting about is changes to maths and English, which we'll touch on as well. I don't think they're quite as good as everybody thinks they are, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, prior learning. We've been banging on about prior learning and how much to take off the top of the band for a long period of time, because as we know, apprenticeships are twice as expensive as they thought they were going to be. So they're worried that we're claiming money for stuff that that people don't need to learn because it's not new learning. So the basis for this new calculation is still about the skills scan. We've still got our lovely skills scan that we've all developed over the last couple of years, with all of our KSBs in a nice big list and a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 across the top that we get the learner to fill out and work out whether they already know any of this stuff. So on this, the way that we're being told to calculate it now, and I think it's good that we are being told how to calculate it, don't get me wrong, is we work out the percentage of the number of off-the-job hours that the learner doesn't need to do, that they don't have to attend when we're talking about knowledge and skills stuff. And we make that a percentage of the usual hours that somebody who came with nothing would. And then we reduce the band maximum by half of that percentage. So if they, and here is, I can possibly make this any, I've gone for the really very basic. Here are some numbers. So if you've done your skills scan, you've worked out a learner doesn't need to do X, Y, and Z, and that's 100 hours of the program, and the program would normally be 1,000 hours. That means there's 10% of it they don't need to do. Our standard top of the band is £10,000. So the top of the band, you take off half of the 10%, 5%. Means that the top of the band is now 9,500, and that's where you start your negotiations. I'd say that reading between the lines in these draft rules, they know we're all charging top of the band. We know that top of the band is where people sit. So there appears to be some acknowledgement, resignation perhaps, that what we're going to do is charge top of the band. So to me, this seems a lot easier way to calculate it. It's a formulaic way of doing it. It takes away all the kind of uncertainty and, as I say, faffing on. In my opinion, there's some very bad advice out there about this stuff, where people were, as I say, taking tuppence halfpenny off here and £5 off there. And that I don't think was ever the intention of what they wanted us to do. They want us... let's see what's going on here. So quartermasters, whoever that might be, fixed costs at 50% an issue if you have a clear price breakdown and they only come to 40%. Yeah, I mean it's a 50% minimum, I think, that that they want to see us reducing it by. But I think that again, it's usually kind of like a learner doesn't need to attend these 10 sessions. These 10 sessions cost £17.50, cost 40 quid an hour to deliver, because the fixed costs tend to be don't tend to be the majority of it, perhaps. Yes, Matt, I was trying to keep Carl a little bit secret there, but that's fine. So I think this is probably a decent thing, but probably going to cause a bit more faffing. There's always faffing, isn't there? But at least this feels like a clear way, a clear idea of what it is that we want to get out of this. That we're reducing that max band, so might not be too bad. Now, those of you with long memories may remember the 72 hours in 2019 when this rule was previously introduced, only to be quickly withdrawn again. But it's been here for a week now. Let's assume it's sticking around, and this is a thing that is definitely happening. So, as we've done for the last 5 years, where two learners doing the same thing, one of whom was on a 35-hour-a-week contract, one of whom was on a 37.5-hour-a-week contract. That second learner needed to do more OTJ than the other, which everybody said was kind of a bit weird. and not good. We've now gone back to this other way of doing it, where if you're on over 30 hours a week, your OTJ is 6 hours a week, minimum, of course. There's no suggestion that everybody must be on precisely 6 hours a week. What this kind of feeds into, that there's a lot of in this version, I think, is this idea that a learner does a specific amount of learning every week. They talk about flexibilities and front loading and back loading and stuff, but clearly somebody's got it into their head somewhere that they want learners to be doing stuff all the time, which for a whole bunch of reasons, we'll come on to this on the next slide, a whole bunch of reasons doesn't work for a whole pile of ways of delivering. Yeah, Peter, it's that kind of day release model that many of us have moved away from because it's the 21st century. So it makes calculation much easier. As long as they're over 30 hours a week, everybody's going to have the same minimum OTJ. However, it's still very clear that these hours need to be calculated individually, so the individuals concerned get all of the support they need to be competent in the knowledge, skills, and behaviors. You wouldn't expect them to say anything else about that sort of thing. So yes, it simplifies these calculations. It means that we aren't scrabbling around for bits of OTJ for learners who happen to be on a larger contract doing that. We can hopefully simplify this a bit, and simplifying is one of the few bits that's simplified in these new rules. Ruth has a question, which I think I know the answer to. Ruth says, what's your understanding of how we manage part-time students? Do you just cut down the hours per week based on the percentage of the 30 hours they do a week? The rules just don't say. I think there's effectively nothing changed for the under 30 hours a week. That again, this idea of 6 hours a week, I think, is a bit of a red herring, that we don't deliver in the majority of cases old school day release, and we certainly don't deliver to people every week. This is just for the calculation. So I think in terms of the part-timers, it's the same as it's always been, that we work out that their OTJ comes to the same calculation it always has, and their duration is extended by the same period. So I don't think there's any suggestion that there's a change in the calculation for part-timers. It's just the same as it ever was. Happy to take other opinions on that, but I think that's where we are with it. Active learning. As I say, I don't know what they're doing with this or why they're doing it. In my comments to them, I said, it sounds like E2E, that what they want to do is basically pay us weekly when somebody's in a classroom, which is just not how apprenticeships work. What it says at the top about active learning is you must have a register mark, evidence of learning, whether that's the apprenticeship itself or English and maths, every 4 weeks, or you have to put them on a break in learning. What about term time only people? Term time only people, by definition, have a 6-week break when they are not at work, and therefore, shouldn't be learning because they're not in work. So that's the one thing, and like all the term time only bits are really kind of, there's a paragraph about them, but it doesn't really deal with how term time only contract works. Also, when you get further down the rules and you look at the change of circumstances bit for breaks in learning. They haven't changed the flow chart. And the other rules about them are exactly the same as they've always been. There's no mention of this idea about how this is going to work. Sorry, Florina says, is the register mark enough evidence of OTJ? I put register mark because that's obviously there's going to be a if you've got a register, then registers are traditionally accepted as being some learning. So that's me using the term register mark. It doesn't say that in the rules. But again, you've got learners in customer service, in retail, where we've planned the program, set out the program perfectly reasonable with the agreement of the employer that between mid-November and the second week in January, no learning takes place during that period of time because everybody's stupidly busy. It completely ignores what employers want, which is to get the most out of their employees whilst still delivering the apprenticeship. I don't know what we're going to do with it, and until they rewrite the breaks in learning paragraphs, it just, to my mind, this is like a big gap in what they're trying to do, and none of it makes sense. He says, taking a big sip of juice. So it's definitely going to be a thing, but we need to work out what they mean, and hopefully we'll get more details of this as we move through to the next version. Rant over. New rant. Wait, where's my banner? Put the right banner up. There we go. Not an official webinar. Progress reviews. I mean, it's just more bits of paper, isn't it? The whole vibe of this is, despite everything else they're saying about wanting to make things more straightforward and reduce bureaucracy and all this sort of thing. Wait. Carl says, if you're not delivering, should they be on a break anyway? Not if you've planned it. If you've planned the delivery, then it doesn't to have, for example, a 6-week break during the 6 weeks holidays. That's a plan that we've started out with a plan of doing that, and it's been agreed by the employer, the employee, and the training provider. Just not delivering doesn't meet the criteria that we've set out for a break in learning for the past 10 years. So why would they be on a break? Grumpy. Progress reviews. Again, it's just more bureaucracy. People are doing progress reviews. I'm not even particularly bothered about the idea that they must be every 8 to 12 weeks. There won't be many people who are doing it outside of that. Maybe, 12 weeks is people are doing 12 to 15 weeks, something like that. Yes, Dan, what indeed about block release programs? It means that if you front load stuff, they've still got to do bits every 4 weeks. There's got to be something that shows that they've done some learning every 4 weeks. It doesn't make sense. I'm afraid that's all I can say about it. It's limiting the choice of employers and training providers of how best to deliver for no appreciable gain in quality. So progress reviews every 8 to 12 weeks, sure, fine. The fact that it's got to be a signed bit of paper that says it happened is like, yeah, Matt makes another perfectly good example of why people, if there's a job that's 6 or 8 weeks out, they're not technically on a break. They're on the job. They're learning on the job. It's not OTJ. There's a million examples. Oh, sorry, Carl. Suggests that all the workplace delivery have to be planned in advance. Yeah, we'll come on to the plan in a minute. I have some thoughts about one particular word. Sorry about all this faffing on with the mouse. It's I'm not sat at my usual desk today because we had some work done in the house. So I'm sat on the couch, which is A, uncomfortable, and B, means my monitors are all in a weird place. You don't need to know that. Maths and English. Let's talk about a nice thing. Maths and English. Your level 2 apprentice arrives without level 1 English and Maths. They only have to do level 1 now, provided that they finish that level 1 with less than 3 months to go in their app. Let's put it the right way around, yeah? Anybody who is finishing their level 1 before that, it suggests that it's certainly not mandatory for them to do level 2, although I think there would be an expectation that, whoops, dear me, stay still. Kelly, I'll come to that in a second. So yeah, we go back effectively to the COVID rules for our level 2 apps arriving without level 1 English and Maths. However, the kicker for your level 2 apps who do arrive with level 1, they do still have to do and take the test for level 2 English and Maths. And yes, it explicitly says all 3 bits of English. And if anybody asks that on communities again, there's going to be problems. Because it's starting to annoy me that 100 people have asked that question. Yes, it's all 3 bits. So it's a change, and it's a welcome change for our learners who are arriving with very low English and Maths. But don't forget, for the people who arrive with level 1, it doesn't mean they're exempt from English and Maths. They must start on level 2. Kelly says, if a learner doesn't attend a lesson in 1 month, but they log OTJ, does that cover the 4-week rule? Seems to, yeah. That seems to be the kind of basic vibe for it. They want to see something that is learning. It's not necessarily about being in a lesson, because they don't kind of separate those things out. Lee says, if they don't have level 1 prior attainments but are initially assessed at level 1 or above, guessing they need to do an attempt level 2 from the beginning. I mean, yeah, effectively. I'd probably put them in for the L1 test without claiming for it. Then at least they've got their L1. That's kind of the standard way we deal with these learners, I think. Ruth says, does level 1 include DE 3.2s, which should meet the standard requirement? Yes, because that's kind of what it's about, I think. That if it meets the standard requirement, then that's what they're doing. So those learners with DE 3 or 2 will have to do the level 2 English and Maths. I think that's right. Emily, it's Emily. Hello, Emily. What will the audit sanctions be for missed reviews or reviews which fall outside of the 8 to 12 MLP? I guess. I mean, it means you're not compliant. And obviously, worst case scenario for something that's not compliant is they have all the money back. But it depends. Good. Yeah. And obviously, I'm not expecting CALC to make comments on stuff that we just don't know yet. But I can speculate because I'm not an auditor. Again, it's going to. My suspicion would be if it's 1 13-week gap between progress reviews, it would be an MLP. If nobody in the organisation has had a progress review for 6 months, it'll be trouble, as it's the kind of standard way of looking at these things. So I think those are my big 5. I think those are the things that are going to have the biggest knock on to how we deliver our programs. And as I said, some of them are half decent, some of them are reasonable, and some of them are just stupid. Some of them not an official ESFA webinar. Some of them are just like outside of the scope of how providers deliver and how employers want providers to deliver. I think that's my line on it. So this is where you probably want to get your rules out and a highlighter, because a lot of these are just little tiny things. That, again, like I say, there's a whole bunch of things in this that are just more things to write down and more bits of paper to have. But just before we go on to that, I shall pick up Ruth's comment. Yeah, term time only. I mean, they need to do a proper term time only guide. You know, I'm not talking about 20 pages, but yeah, that paragraph doesn't make a lot of sense. The one that's there about it. It's oh, sorry. Oh, we've always treated them part-time, worked out the average weekly hours across the week. As have I. I know several of you have seen my term time only calculator that does precisely that, to average the weekly hours across the year, which often drops them below 30, particularly where we're talking teaching assistants, which is why I think most of the term time only contracts are not teachers. And then you end up with longer and longer durations. Right. On we go. Small stuff. So this is literally just copied from my thing that I sent through to them, which they described as comprehensive and helpful. So we'll see if it has any impact at all. So where an employer is taking on a new member of staff and don't want to use recruit an apprentice, they must write that down and must be declined officially. You can't just not do it. 26.1. This is with what's the word I'm looking for? With thanks to Paul Rogers, who picked this up on LinkedIn. Go and follow Paul on LinkedIn. He writes really good stuff about apprenticeship stuff. And this is about you knowing that the apprentice is on the right PAYE scheme, the one that's paying into that's either paying into the levy or not. And there is no way for us to see that information in the apprenticeship service. There is no way. All we can do is ask the employer. We can only ask the employer, are they on the right thing? And who's that helping? That doesn't say that they definitely are. It also comes with a delightful evidence requirement, which we'll get to later. Para 31.1. This is an interesting one because we talked about this a lot. It is okay for an employer. I mean, it's not okay for an employer to pay apprentice minimum wage anyway, but it is legal for them to pay apprenticeship minimum wage between the start of the apprenticeship and the learning start where there's a gap. The rule says this will probably only be a couple of 3 weeks. So do keep on top of that. As I say, I don't think anybody should be paying it. Everybody should be paying a living wage, but there we are. But that's a nice little clarification that's always been a bit vague. And there's a few bits of that. Thanks, Emily. Yes, this should be going as a recording pretty much as we finish. It should be up live, so and on the same link. See you soon. Mentoring and shadowing is still eligible as an off-the-job activity, but it needs to be explicit on the plan when you start, that it is a thing that is going to happen. I think we'd probably do that anyway, wouldn't we? I think we'd probably have that as a thing. But just to make clear when you're setting out your plans. Para 44 is an ILR thing. Actual OTJ now goes on at Gateway and needs to be recorded for withdrawals and breaks in learning, which we haven't done. primarily because the validation rules couldn't deal with it properly. So I'm sure our friends, Mark Shield and colleagues, are working hard to make sure that this actually works now. Para 45 is an interesting one. It seems to be a lot bigger on normal working hours as a thing than previously. And what I've asked is, in the off-the-job guidance that's now 3 years old since it was last updated, there's an explicit bit in there that says time off in lieu is okay. In an example where a class is in the evening. So I've always taken it that time off in lieu is fine when stuff can't be delivered during normal working hours. But Kelly says, do we agree the changes in OTJ rules will only apply to starts from 1st of August? Yeah. I mean, as is kind of fairly traditional, unless it's explicit. Unless it's explicit, we assume that all of this is just from 1st of August. Ruth has made a very good point that I've also made. What counts as change in circumstances for the actual OTJ? Yeah, I've said a change of employer is a change in circumstances, but we can't put actual OTJ in there because it's because nothing happens to the program. The program aim is still the same, so we can't record actual. The OTJ evidence collection template document covers total. Cool. Thank you, Carl. I'm hoping it says total is fine. This is where people, this is 45.3 is what this week's FE Week story is about. What does 4 weeks behind mean? Because, and more importantly, how is this going to be audited? Because to me, this sounds like a qualitative pedagogical question. And I've never yet met an auditor who likes answering pedagogical questions. They're not teachers. We're not. Well, some of you may be teachers. I'm not a teacher. So this kind of replanning, particularly for withdrawals, that makes no sense. And there's all this stuff about effectively them not wanting to pay us if somebody's not on enough program. And my argument's always been that the kind of quid pro quo for us being paid for that last month where we're chasing up the apprentice and they're not really engaging properly, that costs us money. So that's the quid pro quo for them not being on the course as much as they should have been. But there's some kind of, it's penny pinching, and it's kind of meaningless and awful little things around the edges. We can't possibly have a penny or 2 pennies that we couldn't possibly be eligible for. It annoys me as a kind of, rather than them treating us like grown-ups and as people who are not on the rob. So that's, yes. I mean, I think that's interesting, isn't it, Carl? It doesn't talk about 4 continuous weeks, just 4 weeks. Because if somebody's been attending, has got a tick in the box to meet that kind of active learning rule, they could still be way behind. Well, it feels like we're just going to be replanning all the time, at which point it isn't a plan, is it? It's just some stuff. Oh, sorry, Ruth. As a provider who's picked up apps where 2/3 of the duration, but only done 1/3 of the content, not enough funds left. Absolutely. But again, that's bad people. And they should change the rule about whether we're allowed, that's all the money we're allowed. Because how are they going to catch people? the only way they can catch people is by auditing them. They don't have enough money to audit everybody. So it's just bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy. That's the problem. But yeah, it is a pain in that scenario. Interestingly, now the other big thing that I didn't bother mentioning, because I guess we've all already done, Control H, find, commitment statement, replace, training plan, replace all. I'm sure that we've already worked out that it's a training plan, not a commitment statement now. But the word when has appeared. The word when things are planned, which has traditionally not been there. And if we look at the model commitment statement, which will obviously be being updated, that doesn't have when on either. That's just a list of stuff that is going to happen between the start and end of the apprenticeship. Again, micromanaging. That's the phrase we're looking for here. They want to micromanage our delivery because they don't trust us. And I don't know why they don't trust us. Here's an interesting one. 50% of time in England is subject to review, which will be released in due course, which usually means in about 18 months' time. Again, I can't see it. I think what it's about is home workers in Wales and Scotland whose place of work would traditionally be England. We did have a classic one over lockdown where somebody had gone back to Barbados. That was fun. But her office was in London, and she would have been traditionally here. So it's there. Who knows whether it'll happen or not, or what it'll do. Sorry, Carl. No delivery can take place before the plan is signed. What happens if it does? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, if we're replanning all the time and it needs to be re-signed all the time, what of that delivery counts? Yeah. Another good reason it's not a good thing. Prisoners will eventually be eligible for apprenticeships. We've only been talking about it for an actual decade. It is the Prisons Act 1952, which forbids prisoners from signing a contract of employment. This can apparently be amended by secondary legislation. And it's going to be a small pilot, probably with one or two providers, those who are working in the estate anyway, I'd imagine. So it'll be the usual suspects, if you'll pardon the dreadful, but dear me, I didn't mean that at all. Becky asks, does it need to be re-signed or just recirculated? Yeah, I mean, we don't know any of that stuff yet. That's kind of deep law. There's a commitment statement needs to be signed. Do amendments to it need to be signed or just agreed? Mm-hmm. Oh, back on the wrong screen again. There must be an easier way to do this. This one, a thing that has been asked, again, one of those things that perennial communities' favourites, about whether managing directors are allowed to be apprentices if they haven't got anybody above them. And it's been clarified. No, basically, no. Which is fine. And it's nice that it's clarified. If they want to do an MBA, they can go and pay for it. I'm sure it's tax deductible in some form or another. Yeah, I mean, sorry. Let's not get too tied up on whether it needs signatures or not, because we don't know. It needs to be agreed with the employer, says Carl. Suggests signed. Suggests, yeah. There we go. It's just lots of sighing. If you are delivering flexible job, these funky new things, flexible job apprenticeship agencies, the LDM code is 383. It's already on the LDM list, which interestingly is now no longer a spreadsheet, it's a webpage. which I think is good, but also doesn't mean we know necessarily when it gets updated. Initial assessment, I was toying whether to put this in the top 5, and I thought it's not really top 5, not least because, so the question is, initial assessment by definition takes place before learning starts. So if it takes place before learning starts, how are we allowed to claim it if it's not during learning? Why else would, if they put it as an eligible cost, by definition it must be. Again, the problem with all of this is none of the bands are going up. Everybody's charging top of the band anyway, so it doesn't matter what's an eligible cost and an ineligible cost because none of us have got enough money. I see that I've put this one out of sync, but if you're delivering the dairy technologists standard, and none of you are, that is the only standard for which you can claim residential costs. It is quite hilarious that they have been quite so specific to include specific things for our friends who are milking the cows. I guess they'd go to a special place where there are practice cows. Good. They don't want us to include the costs over band max. Where we're charging over band max, they don't want us to put it in the ILR anymore, which is cool, but also more faff. I mean, we were just discussing it this morning on communities in terms of what this means in terms of the PMR records, in terms of so if we're charging somebody 12k for a 10k max band, we'll be and then non-levy, we'll be sending them a bill for £2,000 plus 500 quid. Do we have to have two separate invoices? So the invoice, so the invoice for the bit that is going in the PMR is there, or can we just one of those classic things that looks like it's quote reducing bureaucracy, which actually will end up being more faff. But at least they're kind of clear that they don't want to see any TMPs over the band max. It should be easy to kind of to look after. It kind of reminds me when we used to put fees in the ILR for adult classroom, and there was all sorts of faffing on about exactly how much we were allowed to charge. And I spent hours taking £10 registration fees off a bunch of IT courses so that they weren't over this mythical 37.5%. And then they just lost interest in it. And it feels like they've just lost interest in this. I don't know why they've put this list of ineligible costs in. Jim, thank you, Jim. Jim says ALP email says they're asking for all bands to be increased rather than wait for the course by course reviews. Yeah, I'm sure they ask for a lot of things. They do ask for a lot of things, and nice that they are asking. I think the chances of it happening are pretty slim. Ineligible costs, like it says, you cannot pay for overheads and heating and things, but this is what we spend our profit on, right? Where we've set out the reason that we are charging top of the band is we have this much teaching cost, this much admin cost, and this much profit, and that profit is what we use to pay the heating bills, to pay the other members of staff who aren't teaching, etc., etc., etc. It's weird. It implies it. People are going to read it the wrong way and think that they can't spend any of this money on stuff that they're allowed to spend it on. Para 107, more bits of paper with more things on. They want written confirmation for additional payments. It's worded that it's just about care leavers, but I think it's all payments as well, because they Carl is saying I think it's all learners, but the sentence does need to be clearer. And Lee says 338, which I guess is the evidence paragraph, suggests all additional payments. I'm pretty certain it is, because they've done this before on those care leaver paragraphs, where it's additional payment paragraphs where it sort of only talks about care leavers, but it's definitely about everybody. Why on earth we need written confirmation rather than just, hey, look, it's left our bank account, it's gone to their bank account? You know, this grumpy. Hey, we're a lot further ahead than I thought we were. Considering we're 46 minutes in, we're bang on here. Annoyingly, non-levy is still in scope for bloody ESF match. They won't tell us whether any of it's actually ever been used for ESF match, but you've still got to have the plaque and you've still got to have the bloody logos. It is nonsense. And the retention date has now gone from 2030 to 2034. So do invest in long-term storage somewhere, possibly down a mine. Boo hiss indeed. Sorry, wait. Now we've got a bit of chat going on. Is an email from an employer email address okay for written confirmation? It doesn't say signature. So they say we want to see that we've been paid above. Yeah, I think you're right there, Becky. I think that is just a weird little doodah. Posters, not plaques. Sure. I remember once upon a time, and I'm sure I've told this story many times before, community organizer would wander around with an ESF plaque in her bag just in case. It's definitely a true story. But yeah, you know, if we knew that non-levy was categorically being used, I'd kind of have a bit more, I'd be less fussed about it being there, but we don't, and it almost certainly isn't. I mean, admittedly, they've got very little AEB to use now that it's all devolved out. Hey, it's Paul. Hi, Paul. Yes, go follow Paul on LinkedIn. He writes good stuff. Evidence. So these are the three annoying things that I found in the evidence so far. A documented discussion about the role at the beginning, rather than just, I guess, the skill scanner and all the other 78 pieces of paper. A documented discussion about the role and all the things, which seems a bit excessive. 324's got contract of employment in. Do you remember when we used to keep contracts of employment? And then they said we didn't have to anymore. And now they're saying we do. A contract of employment won't tell you what PAYE scheme somebody's on. A payslip probably might. But, you know, I think the only place I know where mine is on the P60. And obviously somebody starting a new role won't have a P60, will they? So yeah, it's just not doing anything to help. And 328.2 is this about every 4 weeks. Becky says, do we think the discussion needs to be something separate from everything else? It's a bit kind of, I mean, I guess that in the majority of cases, we'd probably be taking notes as we were talking people through the skill scan and everything, about whether there's specific things that a learner needs that not necessarily everybody else would. So I think that's fine. Yeah, potential GDPR breach. You don't want, in the same way that we do not photocopy passports, and if anybody on this call photocopies passports, please leave immediately. But yeah, same thing with payslips and contracts, that it's not information we need, so why are we collecting it? document things. Could interview notes be used for evidence of discussion? I think that's exactly what it is, Tia. Hello, Tia, by the way. Link the discussion to the skill scan, square the circle. Yeah, it's all part of that thing, I think. I don't think we're necessarily asking for much stuff that we aren't doing in general. It's just the fact that it's now an evidence requirement is annoying. Lee, do we think self-dec would count as evidence of employment, or will we definitely? It's about the PAYE scheme, I think, Lee. And I don't think the contract of employment proves that anyway. So it's there at the minute. If enough of us email them and tell them that we don't want to, maybe they might change their mind. That's all we can do at the minute. And this is why I'm not charging any money for this webinar, because I don't have the answers to these questions, because these are draft funding rules. And imagine that somebody might charge to have a discussion like this. Couldn't be me. Hashtag not an official ESFA webinar, hashtag not an official LSEC webinar. Eligibility, a couple of little things in eligibility. Obviously, the Ukrainian statuses have been added in, and they go on the list. And if you've attended my eligibility talks in the past, the list is all the people who don't have to wait 3 years. Because this came up a couple of weeks ago, I put it in my thing about family members, and it's confusingly written at the moment. And I think it should say, where an EEA national has obtained pre-settled or settled, their family members are eligible for funding if, rather than the other way around, which is what it is at the moment, which can be kind of read two different ways. Employed status will be cross-checked with HMRC. Yeah, in which case, if they're checking it, why do we need to check it? Very good point, Ruth. Paul suggests it's a threat. Jim's got a doozy. Jim's always got doozies, but here's a doozy. Large companies with multiple levy pots who want to use the old one up and then move apprentices, would that require new contracts of employment? I mean, I guess it would be effectively TUPE, I think. And yeah, we know when we do TUPEs, it's treated as a change of employer. Although now we're not returning EDRS numbers. What else are we changing when we change employment record? I guess how it links to DAS. So to answer your question, Jim, yeah, probably. The other thing, hidden away at the bottom of the eligibility rules, there's a bunch of extra bits for 16 to 18-year-olds. And I wasn't sure, so I checked. But where you've got learners in those categories, let's have a look at those categories, because they're weird. They're the funny, weird ones, like we get on the study prog rules. Let's see how easily I can get to pew, pew, pew. Whoops, too far. Back a bit. Aye, aye, aye. Do, 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 do. Here we go. So these 4 bits here, so which again are the ones that kind of echo through the study prog rules. So children as diplomats, etc., etc. British. The 4th one's interesting. Anyone who's a British citizen. Look, here I am with my blue passport. Anyone who's a British citizen, but is 16 to 18, is basically immediately eligible. And I want them to put the word immediately in here, because otherwise it implies that there's the 3-year rule's still there. So that's my other little favourite eligibility bit. And then one last thing. There was a rumour, and I don't know where it came from, and I think it was AELP, but that they were going to mess on with the subcontracting definition, and everybody who wasn't employed would be a subcontractor. Thankfully, they've had second thoughts, and the subcontracting definition has just had the word freelancers added in. Thank God, because as we know, in order to deliver, in order for a subcontractor to deliver for us, they have to be on RoTap, even if they're just as a supporting provider. So just imagining hundreds of self-employed assessors all suddenly having to apply to RoTap was just like ridiculous. So they have at least been quite sensible there. Thank goodness. Have I missed anything? Is anybody sat there going, well, I thought he was going to talk about this and it hasn't come up at all? Because it's entirely feasible. Obviously, there's bloody a squillion pages of this stuff. So more than happy to pick up anything else. If I see Peter and Jim and Ruth are having a nice chat, which is good in the chat there. I think if you are watching this on delay, you should be able to see the live chat if you haven't got it full screen. I'm taking that as nobody thinks I've missed anything, unless my stream is being a bit slow. In which case, I shall move on to plug time. Next Friday, next Friday, I am charging people money because I do know what I'm talking about. Matt, I'll come to that in just a second when I finish my plug. We're doing study programs for beginners. Be 2 hours of real proper 101 study programs, learner eligibility, what an hour is, what a study program looks like, what it's made up of, all that good stuff, ILR things. If you look in the description down there, and it is and it is before the 17th of June, you will find a link to the little form to fill in, which tells you more about it. Yes, it's a per organisation charge. So if you've got half a dozen people who need training and study programs, it's still only £50, because I like to give my friends value for money. So if that's you, then that's great. Let's see what's picking up here. Matt, any thoughts on what diagnostic testing of occupational competence looks like? I think that this is the stuff you do after the skills scan. So where you've got, if somebody does a skills scan and it's all ones, it's fine, isn't it? They're definitely not competent in any of this stuff. It's where you've got people who are on 4s and 5s and you want to go deeper in with them, and you're having that discussion with the employer about whether they're really competent in this stuff, what their level of competence is, where you're looking at specific bits of the apprenticeship. I was talking to a different Matt who is, I believe, on the call about this earlier, and they were saying they do a trades test at the beginning anyway. So stuff like that. I don't think there's going to be a BKSB equivalent. Let's put it this way. I think diagnostic testing is just you having a good chat with the employer and the learner, the prospective learner, where they're saying they have a level of competence, to make sure that you're getting that right. So I think it is more than a skill scan, but I don't think it's like I mean, somebody's potentially out there building it now, but I don't think it's the equivalent of BKSB for VOC. Peter, I'll just say yes, they are, because they deliver about 3,000 apprenticeships a year, and good on them. But I don't think they're worth £1 billion. Jessica says evidence was only around confirmation they're on a wage. Or Sorry, Jessica, I'm having difficulty passing your sentence. So there's a thing about the national minimum wage, which has always been a kind of tick box for the employer to say, yes, we promise we will definitely pay them the national minimum wage. I would normally do that as a declaration. As I say, once upon a time, 10 years ago, contract of employment was a thing we did have to keep. And then, as was rightly pointed out, there's no kind of reason for us having all of that information, whether it's a GDPR breach or not. I'll leave you to discuss. But it's certainly information we do not need. So that, and similarly with wage slips, this feels it. I'm certain it's popped up to deal with the PAYE scheme issue. I don't know how big the PAYE scheme issue is. But there we are. It must be an issue, otherwise why are we having all this stuff? Oh, sorry, Tia. Normal working hours is the apprentices, not the assessors. The assessors work whenever they have to, for not enough money. Sorry, I did see that pop up before. Yeah, normal working hours is about the apprentice. So the classic toil thing is an apprentice accountant who has to go to night classes to do their AAT. But as long as they have the afternoon off or the following morning off, that's all fine. That's kind of time off in lieu. Ruth, do you think we should all feedback individually about the draft rules? Yeah, totally, because you'll all have slightly different takes on things. And I'm not here to lead a revolution, honest. Obviously, AALP are very much putting theirs in. I imagine Association of Colleges will be as well, but we know for certain AALP are. So for those of you who are members of the association bodies, copy them in, basically. But yeah, I think, like I say, everybody's going to have a different take on it. So please take the time over the next fortnight to pick the bits that are really annoying to you and tell them. As I say, mine was kind of 1,400 words because I went through it line by line. Don't do that. Nobody has the time to do that. But yeah, do craft an email and get it in there, because this is how, if they know a bunch of us are upset about it or don't understand it or think it's unworkable, then that's the only way it changes. Tia says, is there a chance they will clarify terms on money? Bloody hope so, mate. And that's explicitly what I've asked for, because it's been wobbly for a while, and these rules just make it kind of badder. So we'll certainly be, even if the rules don't change, we can still push them to get better clarifications on it. David says, if the employer doesn't confirm receipt of additional payment, what can you do? Well, exactly. What exactly? You can show a bank statement showing it has left your bank account and been sent to their bank account. How is that not sufficient? And yeah, all of this seems to be about adding additional work for all parties. It's a thing. As Matt, thank you, Matt. Always appreciated. I don't think it's quite time for a nail, not least because I was out last night and I'm just about not hungover anymore. It's a young man's game, drinking on a Thursday night. Thank you very much for joining us. We had nearly 90 people there at some point. We still got 77 on the line. It's very much appreciated. Give me a follow if you're not already following me. Go and find me on Twitter if you want to see me moaning about ESFA and subtweeting Glenford. Otherwise, hashtag not an official ESFA webinar. I'm sure there'll be official ones coming along. Hopefully they'll be as nice as this one was. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And I shall hopefully maybe even see some of you in person sometime soon. But otherwise, have a good Friday and a good weekend, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.